Well, that was a few video clips and results from a recent shoot where hopefully I was using the right camera. But it's often said it's the photographer, not the camera, that gets the results. Well, that's not always the case, and maybe you do, in fact, have the wrong camera. Let me explain. So I do these occasional YouTube videos. I create additional content for my E6 subscription via my website. I teach photography with an online photography course for both beginners and advanced photographers, and I also run photography workshops for even more personal tuition. Now, it's these city workshops in particular that I see photographers using their cameras. I see them out in the field, or in the city usually, using their cameras, or more often than not, struggling with their camera, trying to take good pictures but often failing, not because of the composition, the light, or the subject. No, maybe, just maybe, it's because of the camera they were using. For many years, as most of you will know, I used to shoot with Olympus cameras. For most of those years, other photographers would scoff at my camera choice. If they changed camera brands, Olympus would never be one of their options. It would usually be a switch from Canon to Sony or Nikon to Fuji perhaps, maybe even to Leica if they could afford it, but never Olympus. So basically no one ever took Olympus and the Micro Four Thirds format seriously. More often than not, the choice was either full frame or, well, nothing else. So, as a good teacher on these workshops, I will often question the photographer's choice of camera. What made you choose the camera you now have? What made you swap if you did? I ask how long you've had it for and how do you actually find it? Now, probably halfway through the session, I would politely suggest, because of my observations, that in fact, I think they've actually bought the wrong camera. Sorry, but the camera is just a tool, right? And which camera you use doesn't matter. Well, it does, but it doesn't as well. It's important to pick the right camera, but any model will do in the end. The brand is irrelevant. Well, except where it's important. Any camera will do, but I wouldn't just use any camera. You can use any camera if you're a decent enough photographer. The camera isn't important in that respect, but not every camera is right for you. I can see this is going to be more complicated than I thought. So personally, I haven't used that many cameras over the years. I had my 35mm film cameras when I started out, and then I switched to medium format, a Mamiya RZ67 when I turned pro. I used this for 10 years before going to Canon with a switch to digital. Then after 10 years shooting full frame digital, I then downsized to Olympus, and I used a few of their models for another 10 years before I did the recent swap to Fuji. Yeah, I know, boo. And this is backed up by the twin Ricos, which have more or less replaced the rangefinder style of Olympus Pen Fs that I had. A few cameras then, but not that many, and by my own history, there won't be another swap for another 10 years. But don't hold me to that though. It's not a lot in comparison to some photographers, and you may be one of those, or at least I bet a few of you out there have many more cameras than I do. Some photographers seem to swap on a yearly basis, and on certain YouTube channels that's possibly more for views than anything else. Gear review channels and even certain camera brands reign supreme on YouTube, and of course if you rely on YouTube as your primary source of income, you depend on those views. But telling people I swapped to Fuji for my own personal reasons rather than for views is like, well, talking to a brick wall really. So I chose the Mamiya medium format film camera as I wanted the waist level viewfinder experience. Most of my contemporaries were using the SLR style Pentax 6.7, a more compact style model but still using the 6x7 format, and therefore ideal for travel. But I decided that was not the camera for me. I paid the price with the Mamiya for its extra size and weight, but being able to rotate the film back rather than the camera body was a dream and made vertical shooting a breeze. There were no L brackets back in those days. When I chose the Canon 5D when swapping to digital, it was either this or a Nikon. I can't remember why exactly, but the Canon won. I think it may have been to do with the choice of tilt shift lenses that did it. Canon's versions were just better. My Olympus journey was decided by a need for a more compact camera system, and they used to be referred to by this term, CCS. And having used a second-hand Panasonic GF1 for a few years, I was won over by the Micro Four Thirds sensor. The cameras I have owned then, luckily or by decent research, have been suitable. They've been the right camera for me at the time. They did what I wanted. They take nice pictures and they are nice to use. My choice, as I say, for a long time was the Olympus cameras. I know from my experience just how versatile and user-friendly they were. So, as I was demonstrating to the person on my workshop, I won't say client, I hate that term. I was demonstrating how I take pictures, and if there was any reason they couldn't easily get the same shot, or there were obstacles in the way, simply from using their choice of camera to get the shot, I would let them know to highlight any issues that I thought were of relevance to them. This is offered as helpful information, of course. They can ignore my advice, of course, and maybe they just bought the only camera they could afford and therefore couldn't really afford to swap now, which is fair. I wasn't there to judge. So it would maybe give them food for thought on where they needed to change a camera if and when funds allowed. My job was done. So even though I've said in the past that a camera won't change you as a photographer, there is a case that the wrong camera can hold you back or prevent you from improving. The most common fault I highlight on the workshops is having too large a camera. We may be doing a city workshop in London or Manchester, other cities also available, and their big and heavy digital SLR and even bigger and heavier zoom lenses are just a bit too much for all-day shooting. They would often admit this themselves, saying that they don't always bring a certain lens because of this, or admit that the camera gets too heavy after a few hours walking around, and their creativity suffers because of this. The wrong camera then. And these cameras were sometimes bought simply because of bad advice. A so-called expert in a camera shop said it was ideal for them, or in the worst case, that's what the internet said they should get. Never listen to the internet or YouTube. And most of these photographers never even considered Olympus, again because the internet said it wasn't good enough. You know, not full frame, because that's a given, isn't it? Full frame means the best, right? So for instance, the image stabilizing on the Olympus cameras made getting creative shots a breeze. And if these photographers' full frame cameras doesn't allow them to shoot a sharp image at 1/8 of a second, for instance, then they may be missing out some rather creative results that we could take in a city environment. Buttons in the wrong places is perhaps another common fault, or perhaps only having one control dial on the camera for exposure adjustment, say one on the front only and not a twin wheel setup. Almost default on most cameras these days, but some older models don't have this. But even a 12-year-old Olympus EM5 had this, so it's not all about having the latest model either. The setup of the camera is another error that I would often highlight. And in the ideal scenario, we would just have to dive into the menu system to change a setting to make shooting easier. But in the worst case scenario, that setting just isn't actually available in the menu. A simple feature that is missing and has been overlooked by the brand, yet again was available on my Olympus camera. Cameras are just tools, but all tools have different features, different buttons and different dials. If something's missing, it can either just be an oversight and hopefully not that important, or it can be a real pain for not being there, as every other shot relies on its use. Back button focus is a feature that many cameras can be set up to use. Now my Pen Fs never had an ideal back button for back button focusing. The place where the thumb rests on the back of the camera, well, there wasn't a button there which could be programmed to enable this useful feature. So instead, it had a button where my middle finger rested on the front of the camera. I didn't need that button for any other use, so I programmed that for front button focus instead. A workaround, not ideal maybe, but it meant I could use the Pen Fs as I wanted. If front button focus wasn't available either, then maybe I wouldn't have owned this camera. It would have been the wrong camera for me. It would have hindered my workflow, and therefore, even after first use, I would have identified this fault and I would have sent it back. The wrong camera for me. The same thing happened when I eventually came to sell the Olympus cameras and swapped to Fuji. Yeah, come on, more booze. I was tired of the flip out screen on the Pen F. It was okay, it worked and I could take the shots I wanted, but I would prefer a flip up screen as per the older EP5. So when the new Fuji X-T5 came out that had that, it had a flip up screen, then there was a strong case for the swap. I wanted to improve my workflow. The pictures I took didn't change, the creativity in me was the same. The subjects I shoot are all pretty much the same. But now I can take them or enjoy the process of taking them more freely because the camera fits more in the way I want it to. My shooting workflow has improved. It's a nicer experience. I now take pictures, more pictures, with a smile on my face again. So as you know, my other cameras are the two Ricoh Compacts. Lovely cameras, and I'm glad I eventually got around to buying one. But they are not perfect cameras by any means. Great quality, great sensor, superb lens, limited of course by their fixed lenses, but so compact and therefore ideal for me. For many, their lack of viewfinder or lack of weather sealing even would make them a no-go. Yes, I think they would benefit from having both of those features, but whether they could be added without adding to the overall size, well, I'm not sure. I can still work without those, however. I can still get the pictures I want. If the screen-only experience was an issue for me, they would be gone, sold. If that affected me getting the shot, if that interrupted my workflow too much, then that would be seen as a hindrance and one I wouldn't tolerate. The wrong camera. It's not though, not for me. So until it maybe gets improved on a later model, just like they did by making a 40mm lens version, they're great cameras. Not for everyone, as I say, but ideal enough for me. The right camera. The pictures I get from them that make me happy is proof of that. So unless you do happen to come on one of my workshops, see my website for full details, where I can see you working, I will never know if you have the right camera for you or not. Only you can determine that. And maybe you're just not realizing it. It's okay, don't blame yourself. I do feel like it's like having the wrong bra then. Stay with me on this. They say 50% of women are wearing the wrong size bra for them, apparently, but I guess they don't know it. It's the same with cameras. Most photographers are probably using the wrong camera. It may be holding them back. It may be restricting their creativity. It may be affecting their workflow. It may be preventing them from improving. It may just be making them frustrated. It could be all of that, but they aren't necessarily aware it's actually the wrong choice of camera doing all of that. Plus, it don't half pinch at the back. No, that's the wrong bra, isn't it? Yeah. So what can you do about this if you don't attend one of my new Help You Buy the Right Camera workshops? Well, it's research. You have to know what you want, what you don't want, and then find out which camera will give you all of that or not. A new model that offers 60 megapixels rather than 30 may not be it. Probably isn't. More than likely isn't. That isn't the missing feature, but that's often the only real change on a new model. If it can, a new camera needs to be able to improve your photography by improving your workflow, which could improve your photography. So-and-so on YouTube may have got one, for free probably, but will improve your photography. Now you may say, as I mentioned earlier, you only use the camera you have as it's the only one you can afford. Yeah, but of course you don't have to buy new. Many of the cameras I have owned were bought second-hand. The Pen Fs were, and many of my Fuji lenses I now own were bought second-hand, not new. So if a new model does come out, the previous version will be hitting the second-hand market. And if you wanted to change brands, then this may be a good time to do that and grab yourself a bargain. Improving your workflow by changing from a wrong camera doesn't mean buying a new flagship model. It may just mean changing brands or buying an older, cheaper model to get you closer to the right camera. So analyse your camera and your current shooting workflow. What's causing you issues? What don't you like about your current camera? And of course, what do you like? A replacement still needs to have that, otherwise you'll make it worse. So do your research, check out the reviews, and of course see it in a camera shop if you can. Handle it and see if it feels good in your hands. That's important. Is there a button where your thumb would rest? What can this be programmed to? Can you change settings easily and freely with this new one? Can you customize a shortcut to a button to make your workflow easier in some way? So improving your photography is learning about composition. It's understanding light. It is maybe undertaking a project. It can be many things. But improving your in-camera workflow may be another way to improve. Increasing your enjoyment of using your camera will encourage you to use it more and shoot more. Having the right camera is the answer here. Having the newest and latest model isn't, as this can still be the wrong camera. New models are crammed with new tech and stuff you don't need or may not even understand. Get a model that provides a simpler but more enjoyable experience instead. Otherwise, you're just going to find yourself just as frustrated, thinking new is best, but here you are taking worse pictures than before. Don't have the wrong camera. You don't deserve it.